What if the most famous assassination in history failed? What if Julius Caesar did not die on the Ides of March? Would Rome have ruled the earth for 1,000 years? A world with one language, one law, one immortal ruler. This is not history. This is the empire that almost became eternity.
What if history's most infamous murder had never taken place? What if Julius Caesar, Rome's unmatched general, the man who crushed Gaul, defied the Senate, and marched across the Rubicon with destiny at his side, had not fallen to daggers that spring morning? He already wore the crown in everything but name, adored by soldiers, feared by senators, and worshipped by the masses who saw in him both savior and tyrant. Had he lived, would the Roman Empire have risen earlier, stronger, forged into an unbroken dominion lasting not centuries but millennia? Or would Caesar's insatiable hunger for power have ignited fires so great they consumed the Republic and left nothing but ruins behind? For on the Ides of March 44 BC, conspirators struck not just at flesh, but at the very heartbeat of monarchy in Rome. Yet what if their blades missed? What world would await us then? To understand this alternate timeline, we must first anchor ourselves in the real one. Julius Caesar was not just a general. He was a storm, a revolution disguised in flesh and blood. Born in 100 BC, in a Rome still trembling between republic and ambition, he carved his way upward with unmatched charisma, brilliant oratory, and a military genius that seemed almost divine. But his rise was not just forged on battlefields. It was embroidered with scandal, whispered rumors of affairs with noblewomen, with queens like Cleopatra, and even with powerful men. To some, he was Rome's golden hero. To others, he was a dangerous seducer of both hearts and power. His conquest of Gaul turned him into a living legend. For the Roman people, Caesar was the man who gave them glory and spoils. For the Senate, he was a shadow growing too large to contain. By 49 BC, when ordered to disband his army, Caesar made the choice that would rewrite destiny. Standing on the banks of the Rubicon River, he did the unthinkable. He crossed it with his legion. In that moment, the Republic was betrayed, and civil war was born. The war was brutal but decisive. By 46 BC, Caesar stood as the master of Rome. By 44 BC, he had named himself dictator for life. To many, it seemed inevitable that he would crown himself king, a word Rome hated, a ghost of monarchy long exiled. So the daggers came. On March 15, 44 BC, the Ides of March, Brutus, Cassius, and more than 60 senators plunged their blades into him, 23 wounds spilling the blood of Rome's future onto the Senate floor. Chaos erupted. Civil wars tore the Republic apart until, out of the ashes, Caesar's adopted heir Octavian rose as Augustus, Rome's first emperor. Caesar had died, yet his dream survived. But imagine for a moment, if he had not. Picture the Senate chamber that day, a hall heavy with marble silence, where whispers carried the weight of treason. Caesar, already troubled by omens of blood and betrayal, still walks through the doors with the confidence of a man who believes himself untouchable. But this time, history takes a breath and hesitates. His loyal bodyguards, sensing the unease in the air, close ranks. Steel glints in the lamplight as daggers rise, but they do not reach their mark. Shields crash, blades clash, and in a frenzy of shouts the assassination is smothered before it can ignite. Brutus, the friend-turned-traitor, is seized in disgrace. His cry of, "For the Republic," dies on his lips as chains replace honor. Cassius, heart-pounding, flees into the shadows, his grand conspiracy dissolving into chaos. Senators who once imagined themselves saviors of liberty now tremble as cowards, caught between fear of Caesar's vengeance and the shame of their failure. And Caesar survives. More than survives, he transforms the failed murder into proof of destiny. He is not merely a man spared by chance, but a leader chosen by the gods. His enemies are humiliated, their power shattered. The Senate, stripped of dignity, becomes little more than a chorus of nodding heads, shadows of authority clinging to robes that no longer command respect. The Republic, already gasping, exhales its final breath under Caesar's unyielding grip. At that moment, Rome does not just continue, it changes course entirely. From this divergence, a new world begins to unfold. Instead of Augustus rising decades later, it is Caesar himself who crowns the dawn of empire. The Senate, once a proud guardian of the Republic, becomes little more than a theater of hollow gestures, its orators reduced to trembling actors reciting lines written by Caesar's will. The illusion of freedom is swept away like dust in the Forum. Those who resist are not merely opposed, they are silenced. Rivals are exiled to the edges of the empire, their voices swallowed by distance. While conspirators meet the blade, their blood serving as warnings carved into Rome's memory. Yet Caesar is no simple tyrant. His hand, heavy with power, also carries the pen of reform. He cancels crushing debts, grants farmland to the dispossessed, extends citizenship to provincials long treated as outsiders. His vision sharpens. One codified law, one central authority, one unbreakable bond tying provinces, peoples, and cultures into a single Roman destiny. Caesar's eyes were already fixed on a prize greater than Gaul, greater even than Rome itself, the Parthian Empire, a formidable rival standing in modern-day Iran. This was no small border war. It was to be a colossal campaign, a clash of civilizations. If Caesar triumphed, Rome would not simply dominate the Mediterranean world. It would spill far beyond its familiar coasts, stretching unbroken from the Atlantic shores of Hispania to the burning sands of the Persian Gulf. And with Egypt's vast grain fields and Cleopatra's wealth behind him, Caesar could secure control over the arteries of ancient commerce, the trade routes that pulsed toward India and beyond. Silk, spices, jewels, knowledge, all flowing through Roman hands. Now imagine the inevitable collision. Iron Roman legions meeting the disciplined armies of Han China on the Silk Road. A confrontation not in the 18th century, but in the 1st century BC, a global empire centuries before Britain, America. But any nation we know today. Here's where the story darkens, where politics bleeds into the realm of faith. Caesar, unlike Augustus, did not wait for death to taste divinity. He flirted with godhood in life. Temples rose in his honor, priests whispered his name beside Jupiter's, and statues carried his likeness not just as a man, and as a deity. If he had lived, he might not merely tolerate such worship. He might demand it, binding loyalty to Rome with loyalty to himself. In this world, emperor worship could eclipse every other creed, erasing the fragile opening in which Christianity would later emerge. Would Jesus of Nazareth still face the cross beneath Caesar's centralized power? Or would his message be smothered before it reached the Mediterranean? A Caesar who brooked no rivals might have crushed faith at its root. Meanwhile, Latin would reign supreme, one language, one law, one empire centuries earlier. And what of Cleopatra? The queen of the Nile, dazzling, calculating, and as politically astute as any Roman senator. She was not just Caesar's lover, but the mother of his only biological son, Caesar Ion, a living heir who could claim the blood of both Rome and Egypt. If Caesar had survived, would he have dared the unthinkable, to bring Cleopatra to Rome not as a guest, but as his queen? Picture the Forum, where Roman matrons whispered in envy and senators muttered in fury as an Eastern monarch, draped in gold and perfumed with myrrh, walked beside their ruler. Would this have been the bridge that united East and West into one empire, fusing Roman discipline with Egyptian mysticism? Or would it have been the fault line that shattered Rome from within? A scandal too great, a love too dangerous, a union that threatened the Republic's soul itself? Now imagine today's world under Caesar's shadow, a world where history's maps were never drawn by kings, emperors, or presidents, or by one eternal eagle standard stretching across continents. Politics as we know it would vanish. No United States, no British Empire, no patchwork of rival nations clawing for power. Instead, a single superstate bound by Roman law would dominate Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East, its borders carved not by wars, and by the reach of Caesar's authority. The very idea of sovereignty, of national identity, might never exist. Humanity would belong not to countries, but to Rome. And what of language? English, French, Arabic, Hindi, erased as dominant tongues. Instead, Latin would be the universal script of civilization. Imagine unlocking your phone and scrolling through TikTok, only to see captions in Latin, emojis explained in Roman idioms, memes echoing Cicero rather than Shakespeare. A world where Caesar's tongue is not a relic, but the rhythm of modern life. Religion, too, would bend. Christianity may never rise to power, stripped of its chance to flourish under later emperors. Instead, Rome's pagan pantheon might endure, Jupiter worshipped beside Mars, Venus alongside Vesta, or worse, the cult of Caesar elevated into a civil faith. Perhaps even a secular empire where law itself replaces God, leaving humanity united, but spiritually hollow. Science might race ahead under centuries of stability. Steam engines, printing presses, electricity, all born long before their time. But stability can suffocate. A Rome too powerful could silence Galileo before he looked to the stars, extinguish rebels before they could ignite revolutions, and bury freedom beneath the weight of order. And war? Without nations, perhaps no world wars. No Cold War, no nuclear brinkmanship. But without rivals to challenge Rome, there may also be no democracy, no revolutions, no liberty. Humanity could live in eternal peace, or in eternal chains. So the question lingers, would such a world be the height of utopia, or the deepest of dystopias? So we return to the Ides of March, a day drenched in blood and omen. Caesar's death was not simply the fall of a man. It was the birth of a paradox that echoes through time. His murder tore Rome into chaos, unleashing civil wars that devoured friends and families. But from that storm rose Augustus, who forged a steadier, colder empire. Yet imagine the alternative. If Caesar had lived, Rome might have become stronger, faster, eternal, an empire of unbroken marble stretching across continents. But there is another path, darker and more dangerous. His unchecked ambition could have suffocated the Senate, silenced opposition, and burned Rome from within long before Augustus ever ruled. In that single moment, history stood trembling, balanced on the thin edge of destiny, or rather on the sharp, glinting edge of a dagger. And the world we know was born from that fatal choice, so I'll leave you with this question. Would you rather live beneath the shadow of one eternal eagle, in Caesar's vast and ordered empire, where borders vanish, languages merge, where peace is enforced at the edge of a sword? Imagine highways of marble stretching from Britain to Babylon, cities bound by one law, one coin, one ruler. Safety, stability, and glory, but bought at the price of freedom. And dissent is silenced and the emperor's word becomes fate. Or would you prefer our fractured world, messy and chaotic, where nations rise and fall, where freedom is dangerous but real, where innovation sparks from rivalry, where even the weakest voice has the chance to challenge kings? Which world would you choose, the eternal crown of Caesar, or the unpredictable storm of liberty? Comment below, I want to see where your allegiance lies.